This year is our first year of working in professional cycling. We announced our partnership with Israel Premier Tech Pro Team. We wanted to have not only a leader in the space in terms of innovation, so a team like Israel Premier Tech that has really bred their DNA on innovation and research, but to also be able to align what we are going to be doing, which is our first elite level research paper. And with this research that we'll be undertaking, we have brought on board Whoop, who are going to be partnering with us and Israel Premier Tech to capture that data as well.
We're looking to, throughout the course of a season, look at how triple magnesium affects recovery and particularly HRV and resting heart rate. Pretty exciting and it'll be really good.
G'day everybody and welcome back to the Pillar Performance podcast, episode 13, the first of 2024, which is exciting. At the Pillar podcast, we sit down with leaders in their field of research, high performance, as well as now the teams and founders of the companies that help us to play a crucial role in fulfilling our mission, which is to get athletes to the start line in their best condition. At Pillar, we enable that by developing micronutrition supplements across recovery, sleep, inflammation, energy, and immunity. On this week's episode, it's a special one. I sit down with my own team here at Pillar. I sit down with our Pillar Head of Research, Dr. Dan Plews, and our Head of Nutrition, Pip Taylor. We discuss and chat about some of the company updates that came off the back of 2023, which I know a number of people have been reaching out to us to talk about. We also talk about some trending topics coming into an Olympic year. We then get Dan to deep dive, which probably is the crux of the episode. We get Dan to deep dive on the newly announced Triple Magnesium iteration, which is the first iteration of our hero product, the Triple Magnesium, that's now available in our EU and USA markets. And that is namely around the introduction of the TRAACS Magnesium glycinate chelate technology. And then Pip will dive in and explain the practicalities and the benefits of this for high-performance athletes as well. That's an exciting one, so stay tuned. We then finish off the episode. Dan and I will dive in and talk a little bit about our recent announced partnership with pro cycling team Israel Premier Tech, and specifically the research that is now going to be undertaken alongside them and our friends and partners at Whoop regarding triple magnesium supplementation and HRV as a recovery metric. So stand by for that one. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Before we begin, because I formally now will be handing over some of the episode hostings to both Dan and Pip, I would like to take the opportunity to probably bio them and introduce them properly for everyone who doesn't know who they are. Dr. Dan Plews, he's a well-renowned performance researcher with a PhD in exercise physiology. Dan has over 30 peer-reviewed publications across the field of physiology. Uniquely in his space, Dan puts this research to the test in the most practical sense as a coach and an athlete. As a coach, he's worked with athletes who have won more than 25 world and Olympic titles across disciplines such as triathlon, cycling, rowing, sprint canoe and kayak, and also sailing. His training methods can be witnessed and seen via the platform that he founded called Endure IQ. So check that out. As mentioned, he also tests his research on himself. He's a very accomplished age group Ironman triathlete, and now he currently holds the amateur Ironman world record. So nothing to be sneezed at there. Dan has also now very excitingly come on board as our Pillar Head of Research, and it's something we're very, very proud to announce on the episode as well. Pip Taylor is a leading performance dietitian with a master's in nutrition and dietetics and has worked across the highest levels of sport across both endurance and also the team franchises here in Australia. Her philosophy is very simple: bridge the gap between evidence-based science and nutrition and the practical applications of that for athletes. Very simple. Pip has also authored a book, The Athlete Fix, which can be found in the show notes, and has also published research on the complex topic of gut microbiome and also high-performance athletes, an episode that we're going to be releasing later during this series. The scientific approach really does drive all of Pip's critical thinking along her philosophy with all her athletes, and something that Pip is going to be engaging more and more on this episode. Pip is also the chair of the AFL Dietitians Association, our highest performing body of sport franchise here in Australia, and is also the director of the board on the Sports Dietitians Association of Australia. Pip is also our head of nutrition here at Pillar Performance. So, without further ado, let's dive into the episode, and I hope everyone enjoys it. Pip and Dan, tell everyone in the world, where are you both currently?
I'm back home, back on the sunny north coast of New South Wales, which is currently flooding with rain.
Yeah, I can concur with that. I am about an hour north of Pip on far north New South Wales in Australia, and it has not stopped pouring pretty much all of Christmas, right, Pip? Like people talk about, we live in probably the best summer spot in Australia, I believe. It has been such a wet. I actually know what Dan feels like now, living in New Zealand.
Hey, we've actually had we had a pretty good spell of weather. So yeah, I'm in Tauranga, well, actually Mount Maunganui at the moment. So I'm here for the National Middle Distance Triathlon Champs this weekend. So I'm here for Javier and Chelsea. Yeah, it's all going to go down to the weekend.
But definitely not racing.
Who, me? I'm definitely not racing. Chelsea.
Nice. Busy weekend for you. Or good luck to them. Guys, before we begin, I might start at the top, actually. And Pip and I would like to, I suppose, formally welcome Dan to Pillar. By the time this gets released, Dan, we would have let the cat out of the bag to the world. That in 2023, you silently joined us as our head of research. We've been waiting to unveil, but obviously coming on board to spearhead the research and our product direction as it involves the problems we're trying to solve for our athletes in relation to micronutrition. So welcome officially and welcome to the Pillar Podcast. Great to have you. We've loved having you as part of the company as well. And I'm looking forward to, obviously unlocking your knowledge for the listeners on this podcast as well.
Yeah, no, good to be here. And it feels like it's nothing new though for me because I feel, we've had so much conversation and so much going on at the end of part of last year, undercover, of course. But yeah, no, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's nice to let the cat out of the bag, and we'll obviously talk later in the podcast about the project that we've been working on and really excited to get underway in 2024. Guys, I'll start the podcast just explaining a little bit about what Dan, myself and Pip, I suppose, as our formulation and science team here at Pillar are planning with this podcast. We had a chat at the end of last year about how we can add some additional value now, because what we feel now with the knowledge and the breadth of knowledge that both Pip and Dan bring in their respective fields. Pip obviously as our head of nutrition and Dan as our head of research. We wanted to align this podcast very closely to what our mission is, and that's to get athletes to more start lines and better conditions. And our role in that is obviously developing key micronutrition products that obviously they play a pivotal role in recovery and sleep, inflammation, energy, and immunity. However, we know it doesn't stop there. We know that there's just one branch of the tree or one slice of the pizza, as we know. Getting straight onto the nutrition synonyms as we talk there. And we know that there's all these interconnected factors at play that enable athletes to get to their own start line. And we know that start line is metaphorical. It's not an actual start line. It could be a start of a training week, could be the start of a new fitness program. And that start line is different for everyone. But from nutrition to equipment to apparel, lifestyle choices, genetic factors, the list goes on and on. We know that when it comes to the world of endurance sports, gadgets, bikes, wetsuits, goggles, shoes, eyewear, training platforms, measurement systems, we all get the point, that there is some amazing technology and some amazing people doing amazing things in this space that all warrant a voice, and we wanted to bring that to the listeners this year. So what we're going to be doing in 2024 is utilizing the Pillar podcast with both myself, Dan, and Pip as hosts to really connect our listeners to the latest, I suppose, enablers in our ecosystem. So for me personally, for when you see a podcast and I'll be hosting, I'm going to be focusing more on the conversations with the entrepreneurs and the teams behind some of the best companies now on the market that are doing incredible things for athletes and participants in endurance sports. And I'm obviously not formally trained in nutrition or physiology like Pip and Dan. So I thought my voice and the access I have to amazing people, from creators of incredible marketplace platforms like a global leader in nutrition. You'll hear from Matt Johnson, the founder of The Feed, and what their plans are to bring more nutrition products and access to the best products in the world to a global audience, to challenger companies in the bike space like Factor Bikes, who are now coming up at a rapid speed. And I really wanted to unlock their journeys, their stories, and I suppose how they see the landscape currently and where they see it going. That will be probably vastly different to what you'll hear from Dan. So Dan, what have you got in store for the podcast?
Well, I was hoping just to talk to people that I find interesting, really. But hopefully, those people that I find interesting, other people will find interesting. And my interests always lie in the kind of the sports science realm of, but not just pure sports science. I like a bit of practical application. So, going through finding some guests who are experts in their field of different, very niche areas, and hopefully having some great conversations and really bringing out things that people can, they listen to the podcast and hopefully they're going to change some things. Because I think that's when the podcasts are the most powerful, is that when you listen to it and you actually learn something that can change your behavior. And, so that's hopefully what I'll be getting out of some great guests, from Olympians to sports scientists to academics, basically.
Nice, and I look forward to I look forward to listening to two academics try and really nail and I suppose bring it down in layman terms as well, which I think you've got an amazing skill at doing, and look forward to that this year. So guys, when you see an episode hosted by Dan, that's what we know we'll be getting. And Pip, throwing over to you now, what's going to be the focus on your side of things?
Yeah, look, similar to you guys, a whole range of really interesting people in the performance space, but keeping things really practical. So, moving a little bit away from some of the technical research side of things, and what people can do on a day-to-day basis. So we'll be speaking to some athletes and coaches, particularly some that are prepping and in the depths of Olympic prep as we speak, coming into this year. I've got some chefs lined up as well, some chefs that are really in that space of translating the research and translating, I guess, the learnings and information from dietitians and researchers and sports nutritionists in that space to what people can actually be doing on their plates on a day-to-day basis. And as well, bringing in some researchers. I'm really excited as well. We've got some research in the gut microbiome space, which I know is a really, really hot topic at the moment. And there's probably a lot of information out there that we can start to simplify and, again, keep that really practical.
Absolutely. I think microbiome is definitely a buzzword at the moment that I'm looking forward to unlocking in that episode and listening in on that one, because I know it's forming a lot of the conversations the three of us are having on where we're going to take product iteration moving forward from here, and what that also means for athletes in particular is that microbiome space. I wanted to give everyone a bit of a company update. We didn't have an opportunity to do it at the back of 23. I did it after our launch year in 2022 and gave a bit of a wrap up on what we were doing, just to kind of keep everyone up to speed on what Pillar's about and what we're doing. But before I did that, while we were still on track of talking about, I heard a lot of both of you say that we would be bringing in Olympians and coaches. I just wanted to get your thoughts right now. Beginning of the year, everyone's setting goals. Everyone is obviously planning for the year ahead. You're both very well versed in Olympic sports, Olympic athletes, both working in that space for so long. I'm keen to just for you to give us a little bit of feedback on. Right now, we're obviously around the corner from Olympic campaign, where I think it's now 6 months to Paris. I think Paris is 16th of June. I'd be keen to get your thoughts, Pip. What are you hearing on the ground now? What would athletes be doing in terms of this time of year specifically for a summer European Games right now, you think?
Yeah, and look, Dan, you can probably speak to this a little bit more, being in the depths of the coaching. I'm kind of on the outskirts of those coaching spheres and athlete spheres at the moment, but there's a lot of head down. I think as we head towards the games, there's a lot of focus on even the weather, what the weather's going to be like at the games. It's going to be hot, so from a sports nutrition perspective, a lot of those conversations are centering around heat regulation and hydration, and really bedding down some of those practices on a day-to-day basis in training. There's probably, you mentioned before, Damo, about how much more data there is now in that space. Athletes, the wearables, the amount of data inflow, and how people are managing that. So I think what you'll see too over the next couple of months is almost a simplification of that. You might have a different opinion, Dan, but I think it will be, the athletes and their teams and their staff trying to simplify the process and streamline it to games.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the heat thing. I feel like physiologists, they love talking about heat and heat acclimation. It's just, I mean, even if the games isn't going to be hot, it's going to be hot because that means you have something to talk about and something to do half the time. I was in Rio for that. Rio was a classic example. Like, physiologists just wouldn't stop talking about heat, and it was never even that hot. And even Tokyo triathlon was never actually that hot, but it's something that we always get interested in because we feel that that's where we can have our grain of salt and our high impact. But I'm still involved in the Olympic program, so I'm still with the women's kayak team in New Zealand. I was on a meeting with that team this morning, and in that particular instance, and I know this is the same across many sports, is that in some cases teams haven't even been decided yet. So there's still a big scramble for people trying to get to the game. So in the meantime, for many, it's actually it's crunch time, because they're trying to actually find their qualification slot. So there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of trials, there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether people are going or not. But then, any preparation that's worth the grain of salt will be doing the things that they've always done, right? You wouldn't be, when I was at rowing, the same process. It's process. And the same process we did for the past 4 years was exactly the same process you go and do the Olympics. So actually, nothing really changes that much. There's just, maybe just a little bit more pressure and a little bit more analysis of some of the environmental and the course conditions, really depending on what you're doing. So, yeah.
Dan, can I ask, in regards to, let's use rowing as an example. I think it's a really interesting point that no one, when we get to the Olympics and everyone turns on the TV, it's something that we haven't thought about in terms of the actual selection process to make the team to get to the Olympics. Is it right now? Let's use rowing for an example. Is there a if you are programming that squad of athletes, let's say the men's and women's eights, are they right now programming to peak? Like, are the athletes attempting all the trainers and the high performance teams? Are they trying to peak them for now to make sure they're getting the best athlete? And then they have to almost recalibrate.
Exactly. So many
very difficult.
Exactly. So many of them will be like peaking for qualification, especially the ones on the outskirts, because for many, just going to the Olympics is a lifelong dream, right? That's it. And they're probably, some of them realize they're not going to get a medal, but I think those, like, if I think of the women's kayak example, we have a very strong Olympic gold medal hopeful, right? And she's won many gold medals in the past. She is, of course, secure in her place. So she has, it's like a double whammy. She's also better, but she also now has the experience and the ability to kind of do a full prep for the Olympics because she's secured. But it's always a lower level athletes who most likely wouldn't be getting a medal anyway, who are now having to peak for qualification. So, I don't think, like, the New Zealand triathlon team, I think that still hasn't been fully decided either. Obviously Hayden's going for sure, but the other two are not decided, and those two will have to be getting pretty fit pretty soon, whereas Hayden can actually focus on his race in front of him, right? So
I feel like this is a debate that happens every 4 years as to what's the best approach. Is it early selection, late selection? I don't think anyone's ever answered that.
Yeah, there is. I think no selection is the best one because there's always arguments, isn't there? It's absolutely crazy.
If anyone hasn't seen one of the most famous cases of this happening, for any of our European listeners, potentially type in Pip. Tell me, correct me what year this was. I think it was Athens. No, when Ian Thorpe fell off the blocks, was it Athens? And he had to give his, and technically he didn't. Anyway, look up Ian Thorpe in Olympic selection for 2004. So the Australian, it's our greatest ever 400 meter men's swimmer, fell off the blocks, technically being disqualified in the selection for the Olympics. Very, very interesting one as we talk about selection there. But I will do a fast U-turn on this one, guys. We'll stay on track, and I'll dive into a bit of the company update. Thanks both for the thoughts there. Interesting things to think about in the Olympic year. I'll give a bit of an update where we are today and what 2023 looked like for Pillar, for those new to the brand, for those who have been following along and potentially wanted to know what some of the emails that were happening and maybe some insights as to what it's like scaling a company internationally that is only 2.5 years old. So I will be honest, December in 2023 certainly looked very, very different and was very different to how I envisioned the build plan across 2023 to be in January. The plan was certainly to take the company international. That was something that we set out at the end of 2022 to do. 1 year after launch, we knew the space of micronutrition. We knew we needed to get the products to our athletes around the world because there was a huge issue we were solving and continuing to solve, and we wanted to make the product available in those markets as fast as possible. So we set out to take the company international. The starting point was going to be to setting up our entity and business in Germany. We achieved that. Short answer. Long answer is it wasn't without difficulties. For those of you who have ever been a part of a foreign-owned entity trying to establish a corporation in a country like Germany, rather difficult. So nonetheless, we got there. I'm very proud that middle of 2023, Pillar has a European entity over there now, and we're able to have the product on the ground and distribution available to our European customers. With that said, we were then able to open up an additional 13 distributor markets around the world, which is something that probably caught us off guard a little bit, but was a really strong motivator for our team at the demand and the traction of the product and what we were doing in this micronutrition space has legs and was, we're definitely solving a gap there globally. We now have product available at the end of 2023 in Europe, in Asia, Southeast Asia, North America, Australia, and the Middle East. Australia, New Zealand, or Asia Pacific, I should say, and also the Middle East. And let's hope Central and South America very, very soon. TBC at the end of this month. Charlie Lawson, our head of sales, will be hot on the tails of opening those distributor markets, which we're very hopeful to be coming on very shortly. So that was where we ended the year was, and I suppose putting in there as well North America, a market which we hadn't envisioned launching the brand into in 23 just because of the scale and the capacity in which we were currently operating at as a small and new company. The plan was to obviously tackle North America this coming year, but with a very strategic partnership with our retailer, The Feed over there, we were able to do that at a fast track amount, which was a fantastic achievement for the team, particularly the operations team, to be able to make the product available in those markets. I think one of the most unique things towards the end of the year, as a lot of people would have seen as well, it meant we were able to have on-ground expo or presence at events and expos at all of these different continents. And it was really summarized in our December period where we had, on one weekend, we had Pillar being activated across 6 different markets of the world, which was rather mind-blowing for us, being able to do that within 2.5 years of launching the first product into the market. So we've come a long way. It hasn't been without challenges, but for us now in 2024, it gives us a really solid platform to continue to improve systems and operations, which is definitely the focus at the moment, and a focus of when you kind of fast track to put a product into the market, you do have to go and make sure we're patching up the back end to make sure that we can facilitate the product to our customers. One of the other really proud things we wanted to do and was a little bit of a necessity in order to go global so quickly was we had to establish manufacturing in our markets. The biggest thing is we're a headquartered company out of Australia, which is obviously down the bottom of the world, quite far away from a lot of our markets. And because of COVID and some of the shipping lanes, logistics became very, very expensive and also very slow. Slow now more than expensive, which was problematic as well when you've got high demand for a product. So what we did was we set about opening up manufacturing in the USA and Europe as well. And I apologise and firstly thank for the patience for all our customers who maybe have been held up a little bit on product. I will let everyone in on a little bit of background. So around the world in 2023, like a lot of long tail problems with COVID, omega-3 and particularly a high pure version of EPA omega like Pillar uses in our Ultra Omega product, it actually went on a complete global shortage in 2023. So for those who have been waiting for that product to come back in and wondering where it's gone, in 2023 there was a complete harvest that was missed because of COVID. And unfortunately, that meant that there was a complete shortage of omega and particularly EPA high omega, which was disappointing to particularly to you, Dan, very disappointing. But I just kind of wanted to give a bit of an explanation for everyone. We are very hopeful that we've got ahead of that. We're going to have the product back into stock very soon. But like everything with micronutrition, when you select the highest ingredients, it is rather difficult to be able to control how those raw ingredients are supplied into the market. The final and probably most challenging thing we had to do in that manufacturing process was to make sure that we're able to flavour match our product. So, the largest point of difference, particularly for a lot of people out there who have tried powdered magnesium before, was how Pillar was uniquely able to flavour our product. Traditionally, magnesium, and I'm sure a few people have heard me say this before, traditionally magnesium is incredibly sour. There have been numerous companies around the world that have often tried to create very clinical magnesium without success from a flavouring perspective, and it often ends up in a metallic-y finish, and therefore consumers can't take the product consistently. One of the big unique things about Pillar is we found a way around that. We found a way to neutralise this taste, and that is part of the big part of the IP of the brand. The way we thought about it was instead of overpowering the very, very sour taste of magnesium glycinate at a high level, we thought about it very similar to how perfume companies would use a product called ambergris to actually neutralise a product. So we were able to do that and then create a palatable, what we consider a pharmaceutical or a medicine. So when you are taking a Pillar product, whether it's the Ultra Immune C or you're taking a Triple Magnesium, just remember you're taking a medicine. You're not actually taking a sports supplement as much as it looks and feels like one. So for us to be able to create that potency without the sour taste, we had to use a very specific flavouring mechanism without making it too sweet or also allowing that sour taste to come in. But flavour matching that across 3 different manufacturing plants in the world is not easy. And it required me to spend quite a few hours on planes going back and forth. But we did get there, and that is something we're very proud of. So that, if anyone was wondering what the operations team of Pillar were doing in 23, a lot of taste testing on Triple Magnesium was had, and a lot of great nights sleep as well.
I would love to know how that looks like, Damo. Is that you like you're getting the shaker, you run into the plane, you fly to the next place, and you get the other one, and you shake them, and then you taste one, and you get the other one. Is that how it works?
It's actually a really unique. I'll get Jared, who's our content manager, who's actually on the back end of this podcast. We'll pop Jared up eventually, but I'll show a photo from a taste testing this year. But it does look like you basically line up different percentage levels of flavoring, and you kind of have like almost like at one stage for the pineapple coconut flavor to match it in our European market. We had 11 variants. So and slightly tweaked as like 1%, 2% less and less and less. And basically you go through and you've got the original and you move them along and you see how it can be, you can match on color, flavor, taste. But if you have a look, there's this table and there must be 40 samples of it.
I'm just imagining you like wearing a suit like a wine taster, just like rocking up.
I felt like a sommelier. And I was just getting you just do the occasional nod or, I just go, nah, take that one out. Interesting process, certainly a learning curve.
You need one of those super tasters. You know, there are people that have.
I know. I didn't know this, Pip, until someone explained that to me during the process.
Yeah.
Apparently you can. Yeah, you can outsource anything in the world. It's amazing.
They have a very fine ability to match exactly.
They've got superior taste buds, apparently, don't they?
Yeah.
Like a taste superpower.
Yeah, really sensitive.
Hindsight, hey. But guys, so that there summarised, I suppose, a lot of the operational tasks that we had. But one of the things that we did want to dive straight into now was to talk about something really exciting that people will read and see a lot more about now and that's our first product iteration. Since we launched in midway through 2021, we hadn't iterated on our product. But our goal and the reason that Pip, Dan, and I obviously have got together and to make sure that we are moving the direction of our products in a way that matches research is to be a company that will always iterate a product where and if and how we feel adds significant benefits to a customer. And we have been able to do that now in Europe. We have iterated the second version or iteration 2 of Triple Magnesium, which in Europe and the US now is available. And that is through the incorporation of our trademark license agreement with TRAACS, which is from Albion Laboratories in the USA. And Dan, this is where I'm going to throw to someone far more learned like yourself to talk us through what TRAACS Magnesium is. But just letting everyone know, this is something that we've been working on for an incredibly long time, and the TRAACS technology is certainly going to be a game changer for our customers. But I'll throw to you, Dan, to talk about what exactly TRAACS Magnesium does and how it's going to benefit our customers.
Yeah. So I guess a good starting point will be to throw it back to you and say what did you feel was wrong with the product in the first place, or what did you feel things needed improving that led you down the TRAACS path?
Thanks for the throwback. I think for me when Pip and I first, we're talking early in the R&D process, one of the things we definitely learned being from Australia, diving into the micro space, is there were two main things. That the world is very siloed in terms of raw ingredients, and also the research in regards to micronutrition and high level athletes. Those are, and we coin those as athletes who are clearly more active. That's just not a weekend warrior. These are athletes who are, not getting paid to do it professionally, but certainly more physically active than someone who would deem themselves as a physically active on a population census, so to speak. And I think we all know who those athletes are as well. The research behind micros for that particular audience and population was really lacking. So when we first set about creating the iteration of Triple Magnesium, we knew what forms of magnesium we wanted to use. We had research which was done on a population that was as close as we could get to our target athlete, but at the same time wasn't spot on. So we also knew that there were an abundance of ingredients around the world and labs that were doing work on minerals that would be one day available to us in Australia, but at the time they weren't. So it was more just a cognition of being able to understand that while we were very proud to get the product to the market, it was never a finished product, and I don't think we'll ever really rest on our laurels to say the product is finished.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to magnesium, and I think particularly athletes, one of the main problems is that many athletes are deficient generally in magnesium, and deficiency comes from three ways really. You're not taking enough, of course, is a big one. You're excreting it through the urine more, or you're just not absorbing it very much, right? And I think the absorption part is probably a bigger problem than we realize as well, in terms, especially potentially in athletes who are always under undue stress. So the addition of the TRAACS, which TRAACS comes basically with a chelate, and the chelate, you've got to think of it as like a vessel that helps the absorption. So that goes through the dipeptide pathway absorb by the small intestine, and that helps the absorption. And if you look at the research that came out of it, it did two things. I mean, in people who generally absorb magnesium well, it didn't really make that much difference. But in individuals who had low absorption rates, it made a big difference. And that's both in terms of the time it takes for it to be absorbed and to get up to a peak, and also how long it stays at a peak. So you can look at kind of the area under the curve, and the area under the curve means basically how long does it take to get up, and how long does it stay high for. And and this was really beneficial. And the thing is that even if you don't have a problem with absorption, the addition of the chelate into the TRAACS Magnesium is really, it's going to make sure we're covering every single athlete across the board regardless, because even if we don't have an absorption problem, it's going to be of benefit. So we can be sure that we're going to be hitting all the population of athletes who are taking the supplement much more effectively in terms of that absorption and bioavailability.
And Pip, practically, when Dan talks about absorption, and I think that's the biggest iteration of the product now is for those athletes, and the percentages is unknown, but we know it's high, that have low absorption, themselves in terms of magnesium or other minerals. What's a practical way to actually test for that, or how would you recommend for athletes with their dietitians or naturopaths to do that?
Yeah, and I think you're seeing it more and more. Just circling back to what you and Dan were saying too about absorption and even that small difference in absorption. One of probably the most common question or issue that I have with when people come to you is about GI distress. So for me, even those small differences in absorption, or easing stress on the gut actually play out in a big way in the day-to-day, how that athlete is able to train, how they're able to absorb nutrients, but also to literally to train and race without GI distress. So I think, don't ever discount, even if it looks like a small difference in a research study, what that plays out to in real life. What were you going to say, Dan?
Yeah, you saw it. I was going to say, and then, when it comes to magnesium as well, like, this is why I think every athlete should be taking magnesium regardless of any type of status, because it's almost impossible to overdose and get it wrong. To have too much, you have to be really doing something pretty crazy, and you're likely to be in a deficit. It's not that expensive to supplement with magnesium. It's one of the cheapest supplements there is out there. You're not likely, you could be under, it's very unlikely to get over. Whereas if something like potassium, you do have to be a little bit more careful with something like potassium. You can easily get a bit higher and overdose on the potassium. But when it comes to magnesium, it's such a key nutrient. It's involved in, it's involved in bone mineral density as well. Like 60% of the magnesium that we have is maintained in the bone, and it's really important for like the osteoblast, or the building of bones. And if you have sufficient in that, athletes are likely going to have more bone stress injuries. Super important in the blood glucose regulation as well. Anyone who knows, and anything endurance athlete, hyperglycemia, blood glucose regulation, very, very important for energy and therefore how you feel on those energy fluxes. And then also just your general cognition and nerve transmission. So it's took us so many, it's just one micronutrient that's not really in many foods, or not really that readily available, and it does a lot. So now, we've got this ability where we can make sure that we're touching everyone.
I think that's a really good point, Dan, because there's so many of the other nutrients that you would say test for. But I think magnesium is the one where you kind of look at, you have a broad look at symptoms and issues and level of energy. And you just know without testing, take more magnesium, because as you say, it is so safe to do so. Whereas for other nutrients, you might be recommending testing. It's a good point.
And I think in a clinical setting in hospitals, that's actually one thing that they almost will very seldom test for because of that reason. It's just, they just go, give them magnesium, don't even, just take it. So
if in doubt, take magnesium.
And I think we touched on this on the podcast a lot last year, particularly our forms of magnesium, citrate and glycinate magnesium. there is a growing, and I think thank you to the very large podcasters of the world, Andrew Huberman and co out there, that the understanding that this particular mineral has probably been the most miseducated around the world out of everything. Like, finally, I think there is a very clear or delineated line between people who understand that magnesium comes in 11 different forms, each different form solving a different problem. And Dan, I heard what you said the other day, and I was really interesting. I was with my master's swimming squad this morning, and straight away, everyone, we were talking about magnesium and things, and someone said, make sure you just don't overdose, otherwise you'll get diarrhea. And it was an immediate thing, like, I just wanted to jump in and say, yeah, if you're taking the wrong form of magnesium, because as you've said, it is difficult to, if you're taking the right form of magnesium, the body does do exactly what it's meant to do with it. For example, like, there are some amazing forms that we don't have in triple magnesium because we're solving for an athletic audience, but magnesium threonate, in terms of cognition, magnesium lactate, which has a really slow release function. It also can reduce kind of excess stomach acid as well. There's also kind of magnesium oronate, which is for cardiovascular health, is also really important. And then there are some really, really poor forms, magnesium oxide, which is a synthetically made magnesium, and is very poorly produced. It's a very poor form of magnesium as well.
But just to interrupt, though, Damo, like, the magnesium oxide is probably the one that you see on most shelves in your pharmacies as well, which is just mind-boggling to me. This is the one that that's the one that you see more than any, which is and it's the most useless one, but yet this is the one that's all over the shelves. So I think this is a really good segue to tell the audience about what magnesium glycinate does and why that's the main one that we focus on, Damo. That would be, because people listen to it for the first time, probably they're thinking, okay, so what's in the pillar one, and why do we focus on that?
Yeah, you want to take that away, or you want me to?
Yeah, you go for it.
So, guys, I agree, and I think it's a great segue, because I think magnesium glycinate is certainly now being more educated. We're very fortunate in the fact that with the unique flavoring we were talking about before, we've been able to take the magnesium glycinate level in triple magnesium up to an incredibly potent level, but to also maintain a flavor profile to allow our users to have it orally in also a liquid form. It comes in a tablet form from Pillar, but for whatever reason at the moment, there is certainly a pill fatigue around the world. So for us to be able to produce this in a form that people can take before they go to sleep is also very beneficial. One of the ways we looked at magnesium in this category was that we knew that what we wanted to solve for was recovery and sleep. So we started to look at the forms of magnesium which would solve for those. And as I said before, that there are an awful number of magnesiums, but particularly magnesium glycinate is the one we really honed in on in terms of the research. And what magnesium glycinate is magnesium bound to glycine. And as Dan said before, now we've been able to use the TRAACS technology, which literally stands the track. I mean, that's one thing we didn't touch on, Dan. Guys, when you see now on the pillar label, TRAACS Magnesium actually stands for the Real Amino Acid Chelate System, which is by Albion Laboratories in the USA, and it's a bioprocess technology and it results in producing the highest absorbing magnesium glycinate, which can now pass through the intestinal walls intact. So what glycinate magnesium does, it's chelated or bound. It's magnesium bound to glycine. Now, glycine is the amino acid which is responsible for calmness in the body. And what it then also does is allow why we can use magnesium glycinate in the process is it can support hormone synthesis for sleep. So there is what's called a pathway that the body can take. And this is where magnesium glycinate can really benefit, because what you want to do is try and help the serotonin or the synthesis of serotonin in the brain, which can then transform into melatonin. You want to be able to support that. And that is what magnesium glycinate can do because of the process of bounding the magnesium to glycine, which is that amino acid.
Yeah.
I explained that well enough.
Yeah, that was good. And the melatonin is something that's why the instruction is you take it an hour before you sleep, and because melatonin, the increase in melatonin and a drop in core temperature is your signal to want to go to sleep, which is why, other things that you can do in your day to day, like avoiding blue light after dark, which reduces melatonin. So all those other sleep habits, you want to do everything to try and increase your melatonin just before you go to sleep, really. And that's why Triple Mag, designed for recovery, improved sleep, which we know is one of the three pillars of recovery. I always say the three pillars of recovery are sleep, nutrition, and training periodization. So you've got to definitely tackle the sleep side. But also what I talked about before with the glycinate is it's also actually one of the key things for athletes generally, because it's also very important for the bone health and the blood glucose regulation as well. So it's doing more than just the increase in serotonin and the melatonin pathway. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll throw Pip. I might get you to summarize for us, Pip, there. So the reason, guys, we have iterated the product towards a TRAACS Magnesium is to benefit athletes, and specifically athletes, where we have always been unapologetic about who our products are formulated for. And there are times where people have used our product who certainly didn't need the recovery processes that we had in there, and potentially have had different effects. But our product has been developed based on sports science research, so we are unapologetic about that. But Pip, just kind of covering off then before we move on, for athletes, what is the benefit of moving to TRAACS and why we did that?
Look, you wrap it up with, we know athletes have high energy output. They're always at risk of bone health issues, and GI distress is one of the number one problems that we see day to day. So we know they need to be taking more magnesium. We know it needs to be absorbed well. So this optimal formula just helps tick off all of those boxes. Dan, you mentioned sleep in there, the timing of that for sleep. I think it's that really practical component of meeting all of those micronutrition needs and helping off recovery.
Pip, guys, we will have more information in the show notes. We're going to have a lot more authored literature around the amino, around the TRAACS iteration on the product. For those lucky enough to be purchasing it in the US and also Europe at the moment, your product will have it now available in there as well. So be sure to turn the jar around, or you can head online and find out some more information from it. Again, another quick segue, Dan, before we finish up, because I know we've got a hard stop to meet. But excitingly as well, everyone hopefully would have seen that this year is our first year of working in professional cycling. We announced our partnership with Israel Premier Tech Pro Team last week, actually. Seems like a while ago now, but last week, which is exciting for the company. We, up until now, have been working in the peripheries of cycling, and now we have the opportunity, based on where you wanted to take a lot of our research in this space and what we were talking about. We wanted to have not only a leader in the space in terms of innovation, so a team like Israel Premier Tech that has really bred their DNA on innovation and research, but to also be able to align what we are going to be doing, which is our first elite level research paper on the Triple Magnesium, and particularly, I'm not going to steal your thunder, but what we are trying to find that intervention for. I'll throw over to you just to explain to everyone in layman's terms and very high level, because we'll probably do a separate podcast talking about this with the team from Israel Premier Tech, but just talking about what you've been working on and have planned for 2024.
Yeah. So I had a good conversation with Dave Bailey, who's the head of performance at Israel Premier Tech, last night, and this, I don't want to give away too much in terms of the study design at this point, because we're still ironing out a few things. We want to make sure that things are pretty concrete and set in stone. But, the good thing about cycling is it provides, as far as sports go, when we're trying to make as little impact on the athletes as possible, it's reasonably controlled. It's just like cycling. We have parameters. We have a lot of data. They're already collecting a lot of data anyway in terms of wearables, HRV, resting heart rate, and sleep quality, power on the bike, you name it, subjective questionnaires in the morning. So we're looking to basically, throughout the course of a season, which will include key training camps, it will include Grand Tours, look at how the Triple Magnesium affects recovery, and particularly HRV as being one of those primary metrics, HRV and resting heart rate. So it's pretty exciting, and yeah, it's going to be really good.
You did talk data collection there, and I probably thought it's a good time as well to thank with this research that we'll be undertaking. We have brought on board Whoop, who are going to be partnering with us and Israel Premier Tech to capture that data as well, which is exciting as well. We very much have forged the path now for what I would consider wearable health technology, or performance technology as well. So to have them on board to be able to give us that real-time data, I know you had a lot to do with their HRV implementation when they brought that metric in. So to be able to partner with them and Israel Premier Tech to bring this research to light is going to be really exciting. And something which we're going to be talking about a lot more throughout the year. We'll be having a full section of this on our website. It'll be across socials as well, just to give everyone an update on what the intervention of a triple magnesium product, and particularly magnesium glycinate. We know that is the one that is really going to be trying to function within this study. What we can then develop and author on the back of this.
Yeah, and the ideal outcome of this is we want to publish some peer-reviewed research out of it, hopefully. But I hope that that takes some time, and hopefully along the course of where we're collecting the data, we'll be able to give some gems to the listeners of some early schematic, early research some trends that we're seeing in the data, hopefully. So it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I'll be down in the tour down under tomorrow here in Australia, catching up with them. So it'll be good to see the early season racing. But yeah, thank you for all the work that you've done, Dan. It's been awesome to bring that to light, and hopefully looking forward to spending a lot of time now in cycling as a company, and we know how much how much time it's been for me personally, and Pip as well. It's spent so much time outside of, I suppose, the elite endurance space as well, and particularly Australian team sport. I have been rather overwhelmed, but also deep down quite happy that there is a high performance sport out there like cycling. Certainly for me, I think there is a perception in the world that anyone who's on TV playing sport has the highest level of sports science and data running that sport or those athletes. And I'll tell you what, in many cases it's not the case. But I can, from what I now know, I can tell you that from a cycling perspective, there is every pebble has been overturned, not just rock, but I would say every pebble. So it's been incredibly enlightening for me, coming from a rugby background as well, to see the level of depth that these teams go to get the best 0.5% out of their athletes as well. And looking forward to diving in on that a little bit more. Yeah,
I mean, the good thing is we didn't. We literally had to ask them to collect no extra data, really. We had to provide we had to get some wearables in terms of HRV with the Whoop. But apart from that, everything was being collected, so easy for us.
Absolutely. I think that wraps us up. Pip, you've got a hard stop at 3:00. Thank you so much for joining, and we will be having another podcast very shortly. Not sure whether it'll be Dan or Pip, but keep a lookout on our sign up and subscribe to our newsletter for anyone who's going to have a listen. But Dan, Pip, thank you guys so much. See you next time.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.